Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Dante DiCicco, founder and CEO of Zitti. Zitti is on a mission to be the technology layer that empowers and powers the food service industry, building the fintech that restaurants actually need. Dante, so excited to chat with you, and not only because about your background, your experience, and the companies you've worked at, who you've been involved in, but also what you're doing in the food service industry space. I mentioned before the show, I was talking to some friends and thinking about the layers of technology still need to be integrated in a lot of those spaces, but obviously there's some challenges that we don't know, but thankfully we have you to kind of illuminate us on what that means, what you're looking at, what you're working on, and how essentially technology is in your industry. But before we get into Zitti and all that good stuff, what were you doing before you started the company?
Well, first off, thanks, Julian. Really appreciate you having me and talk about this very important topic of using technologies for the food service industry. Before starting Zitti, I was working at Snapchat. I was here in LA as well. Was an early employee at Snapchat on the business side of things. I was there for approximately 7 years, just a hair under 7 years. Was an investment banker for 4 years before that.
What got you into investment banking and then technology, especially Snapchat, where it's completely opposite of, well, I don't want to say completely opposite, but it's very much more geared towards this high, rapid consumer digestible content. What was that transition like, and what was particularly exciting about joining the company at Snapchat at that time?
Yeah, the transition was really exciting. I started at Snap in early 2015. Snap was at a bit of a crossroads at that point. We had just raised at a $10 billion valuation, but Snap was essentially pre-revenue. So we had a lot of work to do on the business side of the company. Vast majority of the company was product and engineering, and the eventual goal was to go public. And so Snap had hired a chief strategy officer that was the former global head of tech banking to essentially build out the business of Snap and take them public. I was one of his first hires. So I kind of started out in wanted folks with investment banking backgrounds, that analytical skill set to help approach all the different things that the company was working on and really trying to build several different functions throughout the company. So over my time at Snap, I built several different teams, started out building out an ops team. And my last role at Snap was leading international growth for our ad business and did a lot of things in between.
Yeah, man, it's incredible to think about all of the infrastructure that was built after kind of gaining the users, having the product out in market, having a lot of the interface not completed, but enough to where we recognize the app to when we rejoin it. And thinking about that experience and not, I wouldn't say building backwards, but thinking about the operational side, kind of I guess retroactively as the company raised money, did that influence how you operated and structured and how the company is now? Was there a level of maturity that you brought to the company because of that experience, or was that kind of a whole different life?
No, absolutely. I think they're very, very interconnected. I mean, a big part of my time at Snap was spent essentially starting mini teams across the company. And so there were countless times over those years where I was the only person at the company doing a specific function. And then that function would end up being a couple more people doing it. And then that function would end up being a global team. And then I would do it the same with another function. So in doing that, I kind of felt, in retrospect, I was basically starting my own small company a handful of different times at a larger company. When I started at Snap, we were a little over 200 people. When I left, we were about 7,000 people. So we went through a lot of evolution. We were a private company. I left, we were a public company. So many changes, evolutions, all that good stuff. But it was a great experience.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some common sense answers here, but I'm curious from your experience and your perspective, how does a company structure, culture, and all that kind of change as it grows and scales to, say, become a public company? Because those are two extremely separate ideas, private to public. It's a huge transition. What are some ways that you see companies evolve, and how was Snapchat, I guess, unique in that sense in the way they were building?
Yeah. So I think what Snapchat did a very good job of for a long period of time was maintain a creative and innovative culture with the folks they brought in. Part of it is a bit self-fulfilling because Snap leadership really gave their employees the autonomy to hire the additional folks. So creative and innovative people hire more creative and innovative people.
Sure. Yeah.
I think being a tech company that really pioneered the LA tech ecosystem, right? I mean, Snapchat was like the first major private startup to start and then go all the way to IPO and stuff based in LA. So in being that, we were this kind of hub for a lot of the talent in the LA tech and media ecosystem. So we attracted a lot of that, which was really, but it's kind of nuts. Like I remember when I started, like I said, we were a little over 200 people and our goal was to be over 1,000 people by the end of the year. So we're like, we were going to 5X our size in 9 months. And so when you're doing that, I mean, maintaining a culture of connective tissue is tough. I think part of it though was a lot of those hires were in other offices. So we were like starting our New York office, starting our Chicago office, starting our Dallas office, eventually starting our London office, right? So because there are all these like satellite offices, they are really trying to replicate the culture that was in HQ, which was in Venice, like Venice Beach. Yeah. These other places. And so I feel like if we were 5X in the size of our LA office, it may have been a little bit different because it's all in the same place, but you kind of have this clearly defined culture in Venice that we were then replicating and really trying to have the folks live and breathe in the other offices.
Yeah. How do you reinforce that culture in other offices?
Well, I think at least for my experience at a company like Snapchat, I think an important part is everyone using the product.
Sure.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, like we are a consumer product. We're a communications app. I kind of joke that I didn't start using Slack until Snap had been public for like 4 years. Like we communicated on Snap. Like that's how like all the early employees, and that was in my view, a telltale sign of us becoming a bigger public, more corporate company is everyone using Slack, right? And it was like, no, literally like you're staffing your boss, you're staffing your people on your team, you're staffing your colleagues. It was very interconnected, but because of that, we were all power users of our own product. So no matter if your role was engineering or if your role was sales or if your role was accounting, you were communicating with your coworkers. You were a power user of our core product, which made you very passionate about it. And we were all just the best evangelists of the Snap product were its employees. And that was a very cool, special time.
That's amazing. And what was the catalyst behind Zitti? You had been working at Snapchat. I'm sure you got involved with a few different startups in being in not only New York, but also in Los Angeles as well, kind of being in the community. What was the catalyst? What was the inspiration behind Zitti and what kind of got you reinvigorated in this passion behind restaurants and food service and technology and enabling kind of not an old industry, but one that's just had such a legacy technology, I'm sure, built into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think part of it, I think starting a company takes like, especially if you're the founder, right? You're not just one of the first few employees, you're the one who started. There's really two main things that have to occur. One, you have to decide for yourself that you want to start a company and then actually act on it, right? And then two, know the problem that you want to solve. So the first one of deciding you're going to start a company and act on it, I was fortunate to have a lot of like friends and mentors, largely from Snap and some from my Stanford days as well, who had started their own companies in the past. Some were early in the journey of starting their companies. Others had started and successfully sold or took their companies public. So having these influences, I think early on in my career, I never really saw myself as someone who would start my own company.
Sure.
I always thought that I would be a leader at a larger company. But then as I'm going and learning more about it, it really felt more and more like that's the next step in my career that I wanted to take in a post-Snap life.
Sure.
And then in terms of the problem I want to solve, as I was thinking through this from a career perspective, I was in the process of opening my own restaurant. And as part of that process, I'm third generation restaurant owner in my family. My father's family are Italian immigrants, owned and operated Italian restaurants throughout Central California since 1956. So nearly 70 years in the business. My grandpa and his three brothers started it. My dad, his brother, and their first cousins all are running them today. There's probably like 20 restaurants total in our entire extended family, most of which are all in Central California. So I very much grew up in the restaurant, but I decided there hadn't been a new restaurant open in about 25 years in our family. A lot of the third generation folks, a lot of the grandkids like myself, there's probably like 60 or some grandkids, crazy number. We were kind of the first generation to do other things, right? I think my father's generation were all like, some of them were born in Italy and came over when they were young. Other ones were born in the United States, but born to parents that didn't even speak English.
Yeah.
So my dad's generation really as a form of survival, had to work in the restaurant and grow it and expand it. My generation was the first one where people are becoming, like, my brother's a lawyer. I have a cousin who's studying to become a dentist, right? You have people doing different things, which is really cool. But I didn't want the restaurant legacy to be lost, right?
Sure.
And I also thought that my hometown of Fresno is rapidly growing. It's only about 500,000 people right now in Central California. It had an explosion of population during COVID.
Yeah.
So I really thought there was an opportunity to open a new location of our family's core brand called DiCicco's, but reimagine it a bit, have the exact same food, but a more modern vibe inside, kind of have it feel like you're on Abbot Kinney in Venice, or you're in Santana Row in San Jose.
Yeah.
That kind of feel on the inside, although the food and the menu is identical to the other family locations.
Yeah.
And we built the building as well. So it was a dirt lot, from dirt lot to open functioning restaurant. And I decided to take this project on. I was the sole financer of the project and working with my family members to develop it. And my father was heavily involved as a consultant on the project. My uncle is the general manager running it every single day, aunt and uncle, and they do a great job. But throughout this entire process, I'm seeing how antiquated the systems are, how antiquated the processes are.
Yeah.
And most importantly, because I always say it's just solving antiquated processes isn't actually the core problem. The core problem is that independent restaurants are getting absolutely crushed when it comes to food costs.
Yeah.
Food cost is the single most important part that can make or break your profitability, right? If you don't have an eye on how much you're paying for food, your unit economics are thrown off, your cost of goods sold are thrown off, and it truly is something in the restaurant owner's control if they have the tools to wrap their arms around it. So as I'm kind of going through and making these observations, I was at that point over 5 years into my time at Snap. I was thinking about the next phase of my career, could potentially be starting a company. And then I'm on a daily basis, my family members will tell you, frustrated with the processes in this new restaurant that I'm involved in opening.
Yeah.
And then it just became crystal clear to me that it became actually very obvious that this was the problem I wanted to solve and dedicate the next probably decade plus of my life to solve. And it's been really cool because honestly, fast forward to right now, year over year, we've saved my parents' restaurant over 5% on their food costs year over year over the last 60 days. So that's a very cool thing too, where like you see my parents' restaurant as the ultimate pilot beta customer, and we're having that tangible impact that I wanted the company to have so quickly, which is really cool.
Yes. And what is the biggest issue with kind of food cost? Is it not being able to track where you're getting, what vendors are giving you at what price for certain types of products, whether it's meat or vegetables or what have you? Or is it the analysis of that tracking system? Is it all done on Excel and you can't really see the changes over time? What in particular did you see were the gaps that technology needed to essentially, whether it's reframe, recategorize, or repurpose that information? What in particular, or I guess back to my original question, sorry, there's so many in here. First is what was the issue with tracking food prior, and how has it gotten better through technology?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is Excel spreadsheet if you're lucky. And paper and pen, a lot of that too. So really, to break down, let's start by breaking down the food supply chain.
Yeah.
You have restaurants, which are we'll call it the demand side. They're the buyers of food. Then you have the supply side. And to summarize, the supply side is broken out between end suppliers, like your really manufacturers of meat, of chicken, of fish, of produce, of any type of food. And then you have your distributors in the middle. And the distributors are ultimately a logistics company. They're buying food from the supplier and they're selling food to the restaurant, and they're capturing the arbitrage as part of that. So I would say the manufacturers, one example of a manufacturer could be like Nestle or Tyson Foods, but another example of a manufacturer could be like a mom and pop, like farmer of dairy, right? So it really could be a lot of different things, but the distributors are these much larger, more sophisticated companies, and probably half of the food distributor business in the United States is controlled by about 4 or 5 players. And the other half is incredibly fragmented with probably like 15,000 players.
Yeah.
So it's a very centralized at the top and then very fragmented at the bottom.
Right.
So when you put yourself in the shoes of like my family's restaurant, to make it like personal, you're buying mostly from distributors, right? Well, distributors have full discretion where to price the products.
Sure.
Complete discretion.
Yeah.
So a distributor can say to you, like, Julian, if you own a pizza spot, right? Your main parts of your product mix are probably going to be meats and cheeses and flour, because from the dough.
Right.
But then you may have a lot of other costs, like maybe like chicken breast, maybe you serve salad and have all those other things on their menu. So a classic tactic that a food distributor could take is say, hey, Julian, I want to win your business. I'll give you the best price on pepperoni that anyone's going to give you to sign up with me. But then you don't realize you're getting just screwed on all the other costs.
Yeah.
Right. And so it all evens out to being, you're actually a very high margin customer for them. And actually at corporate with these distributors, their highest margin customers are the independent restaurant. That's kind of like their golden goose, their sacred cow, which is really messed up because those are the businesses that are struggling the most.
Sure.
So it's actually quite predatory. The businesses that are struggling the most, that are operating on paper and pen, that don't have sophisticated tools there, are, unbeknownst to them, paying so much more for the food products, more than what I would consider market. And then you also have the fact that the exact same product from the same manufacturer, if carried by two different distributors, could vary wildly in price.
Yeah.
Right. And that's before you start talking about like interpersonal relationships play a big role, et cetera. So really what that means is that if you're one restaurant and you're beholden to one distributor, you have no idea what you're paying relative to what you could be paying.
Yeah.
Right? And that's ultimately where any savings you're able to claw back on food goes directly into the restaurant owner's pocket.
Yeah.
Now, in order to achieve that, you do need to digitize some processes, right? Because it's hard to pull in data when it's all on paper, right? So, so Zitti's first step was building a payments platform. And that is so we can own the transaction between buyer and supplier. Restaurants are using us to pay all of their food suppliers and distributors.
Yeah.
And we've made it as easy as paying your friends on Venmo. You could do it on mobile. It contains all your invoices there. Everything's based in the cloud. It's really good. Very, very easy to use. And it's easy to use because we battle tested this on restaurant owners constantly before launching every feature. Well, now that we own payments, we own all the food transaction data for that restaurant. We know a lot about everything they're buying, what they're paying for it, who they're buying it for, what the frequency is, etc. So now what we do is we line up all their food products side by side, and then we actually pull in pricing across the various network of distributors that restaurants working with, and we run it and would show a side-by-side comparison in the form of the order guide. So the restaurant can say, okay, mozzarella cheese. Well, it's $2.10 a pound from distributor one, $2.20 a pound from distributor two, and it's $2.80 a pound from distributor three. And so maybe distributor three is telling me that I have the best pricing structure, but for mozzarella cheese, you're gouging me 70 cents a pound on this. And so without Zitti, the restaurant could very easily just blanket buy everything. In my parents' restaurant, right? They're spending around $80,000 a month in food costs. That's a lot where you're buying so many cases and because food is perishable, it has to be delivered multiple days a week. You may have deliveries coming in every day of the week. So you can't it's not like a retail store where you can like hold inventory till it sells. It's like you're constantly turning this over and prices are constantly fluctuating. So it's actually a quite complex equation to keep track of. And if you don't have the tools to do that, you can just get lost. And I do think a lot of the reasons why restaurants fail is that they may be doing well on the sales side and have a lot of customers coming in the door, but they don't have a handle on costs in the back of house. And that could unfortunately lead to not a great result. And Zitti's here to try to solve that problem.
It's fascinating to think about the amount of just the amount of ownership that a restaurant owner can have now with their purchasability and even in collaboration. I'm sure as you grow the product, you have more data, more distributors, more information on how people are getting the food that they're getting and where they're getting it from. And I guess out of just curiosity, has there been anything surprising about the distribution of food, where people are getting it, where it's being purchased, the purchase price of it? What have you seen that has been illuminating in terms of the experience that most restaurant owners have purchasing the food that we all kind of eat and enjoy?
The biggest surprise, I would say there's two. One is even large restaurant groups that do tens of millions of dollars in sales a year don't necessarily have a handle on this.
Yeah.
And we like to say that we are your virtual head of supply chain, right? Like Chipotle has 3,000 or so units and they have like 100-person supply chain team. And Chipotle's menu is not even that complex. Anyone who's been there, it's a pretty simple menu. That is 100 people. Sole job is to optimize costs, optimize price, right? Mm-hmm. So if Chipotle has 100-person supply chain team and a successful restaurant group has a 0-person supply chain, and it's a combination of chefs and kitchen managers and the owners all doing it without technology, you could really fall behind on that side of things. So the biggest, I think, one big surprise in learning was how unresourced most restaurant groups are in this very important, critical function. And then the second biggest learning is just the full extent of how much the cost can vary was surprising. Because you may say like, okay, we're having, Stanislaus tomatoes. 3 different distributors carry the exact same thing as Stanislaus tomato. How much could they vary really? Right.
Yeah.
And in reality, the answer is a lot. And for my family's restaurant, we did an optimization analysis. We looked at all their products and said, if you bought the lowest of price for every product, this is your food cost. If you bought the highest of price for everything, this is your food cost. The difference was over 25%.
That's crazy.
25%. And that is just wild. And so, but for us, it actually weirdly makes our job easy. Yeah. It's like we can very confidently say that we can help you. Yeah. Right? And that's more of, it's a very straightforward value prop to the restaurants.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating to think about it, what it does and how it changes the distributors and their experience overall. Now they have customers, and I'm sure changing their purchasing patterns. And how have you seen yet, or what is your prediction about how distributors are going to change the relationship between them and the restaurants that they're supplying?
Yeah. So I think it's more of, this is all yet to play out because we're so early, right? I think that all in a public forum can only say so much, but I can say that we are really out to help and improve the entire ecosystem. Yeah. And we think that more transparency in prices for restaurants is good for everybody because one, it's helping keep the restaurant businesses healthy. It's helping to keep them staying in business. It's helping to keep them buying food. It's also creating more competition on the supply side, which overall is a good thing because the folks with the best price on the best quality will win, right? Yeah. If you can, it's like Zitti's goal is not to take sales away from distributors. It's actually quite the opposite. We want to, if you're a distributor and you know that you have competitive prices and high quality products, maybe you're not getting the visibility that you wish you were getting and not enough people know about your incredible value prop. Well, with Zitti, now they'll know. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. It's incredible to think about what that kind of opens up in the near future. And now that you've been at it for a year, tell us a little bit about the traction. You beta tested it with not only your restaurant, but your family's restaurant. Tell us a little bit about the traction you've gained since then, and also what particularly excited about this next year and what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. So last year was a lot of testing and learning, a lot of trial and error. I mean, we crazy to think that it wasn't a little over a year ago where it was just me. Right. And now we have a full team, right? So I think that bringing on such a great and talented team has been really exciting. Our engineering team is phenomenal. Our sales team are some of the hardest workers I know. Our first employee parent or head of product design is a rock star. And really across down the line, Joni, our head of growth, right? Everyone has just been working so closely in tandem. So if that's been cool to kind of build a team culture right there as well. Yeah. Last year, we were giving the product away for free, really to get more data, more customers, more testing. And we didn't even launch the order guide until December. So the end of last year. So starting in January, when we started charging for our product, charging a SaaS fee. And it's very simple. we charge $150 per restaurant location per month. And we're saying we will save you far more than that in food costs on a monthly basis. You'll get a very clear ROI from using Zitti like on month one, which is really cool. Right now we have our customers are in the hundreds, a couple hundreds of customers.
Yeah.
Right now we are started out geographically concentrated throughout southern half of California, starting in Fresno, then down to LA and down to Orange County, on Chicago, the big market for us, Austin, Texas, and Denver. And now the next kind of two markets that we're starting to get some traction are kind of the South Florida area in New York. So I'm very excited to kind of see us open up those new markets and go. And we continue to grow the team methodically throughout the year too.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's impressive to not only see what you've done in a short amount of time, but also thinking about the ROI in just a month of using a product, when a lot of times you have to wait and you have to really kind of analyze what the functions are, do a lot of testing. But it's fairly clear if there's a structured incumbent before that, once you introduce this technology in this level of organization, you can see, and maybe even to their surprise, I'm sure, see that where their cost savings can accrue. And it's so exciting to see that kind of those results coming so fast. But it does make me think about, just because of whether it's external factors or internal factors, what are some of the biggest challenges that Zitti faces today?
I would say the biggest challenge is that it's an industry full of very hard workers, folks that are on their feet 24/7, right? And so for us, getting in touch with the customer, right? Sounds simple, right? But getting in touch with that decision maker at the restaurant group, that's not an easy task.
Yeah.
There are a lot of folks ask me, they're like, you're building a tech company. You could build anything. You could build anything for any customer group. Why restaurants? Like, why subject yourself to that? Right? And I'm like, because I care.
Yeah.
Because I care. Like, if I didn't care, of course it's hard, right? It's selling any B2B is hard. Selling B2B to independent businesses is also hard too. But it's also so much more rewarding. And I think that kind of like question of like, why subject yourself to this, leaves out the part that how rewarding is it when you're able to actually help these businesses.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been a really cool part as well. But I would say the single biggest challenge is getting in front of the right customer. I think that traditional digital marketing efforts that work really well for DTC companies or consumer businesses and stuff aren't as effective with restaurant owners, right? Like, restaurant owners aren't necessarily Google searching, how can I save money on my food costs?
Yeah.
You know, that's what they really need, right?
Right.
So how do you reach them? And it involved a lot of hand-to-hand combat. Like, field sales is very important. It involves things like trade shows, right? Where there are concentrated and captive audience. And it involves things by leveraging the network effect, right? I think restaurant owners, the most credible voice to restaurant owners is another restaurant owner. And I like to joke, in other industries, people care a lot about influencers, right? But I can say right now, like, my relatives won't listen. If Wolfgang Puck says something, my relatives won't care. But if the guy across the street says something, my relatives will care, right? So it's more like, it's this very grassroots level of credibility you need to gain. And that's why being more geographically concentrated in a few different cities is really exciting too, as you can start building that density.
Yeah. It seems like the network effect, and it can be contagious once, you satisfy a customer one, and then they have a network of individuals that they collaborate with. And that's what all founders want, right? You do good work for one customer, and then that kind of expands, and that network effect really comes into play. And then timing is then the only thing you're worried about, is when is the right time to implement the technology and things like that. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Zitti?
Long-term vision, you can never predict the future, but I'll just say that coming from a company before this, SnapTap, that turned down acquisition offers every chance it got because it believed in its mission, had a long-term goal being staying an independent company. Zitti very much has that DNA as well.
Yeah.
And I do have every intention of going all the way with this and remaining independent as long as we can.
Yeah, I love that. I love this next question, or next section too. I call it my founder FAQ. So I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions, and then we'll see where we get. First question is, what's particularly hard about your job?
What is particularly hard about my job is juggling I think it's like you're almost like the Harlem Globetrotters, where you got a basketball spinning on both fingertips, your head everywhere, right? You're just like holding it all in. I think you've got your product development efforts, you've got your sales efforts, you've got your investor facing efforts, you got your like company operations efforts, and just managing personality, 3 dimensions basically, right? So I think just the juggling aspect of the day-to-day life of a founder is probably the most challenging, but also the most rewarding.
Yeah. What's something that you spend a decent amount of time on, but you would like to spend more time doing other things? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Oh, interesting question. I think that there's a lot of time on over communicating, both internally and externally.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where, and look, I'm also an active angel investor as well. And for me, like there's nothing worse than a founder that doesn't communicate or articulate what's going on, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. Like founders that just go dark, that's not the way to run a long-term successful business, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And you also can't have folks help you and lean in if you don't communicate.
Yeah.
So thoughtful communication is important, but thoughtful communication takes a lot of time. Real world example, this Silicon Valley Bank situation, right? Like we banked with Silicon Valley Bank. There was a lot of communication that I had to do to our investors, to our team, to all these different parties to ensure that everyone was on the same page. Everyone knew that I was all over it, that my team was all over it, and that we were going to navigate through this no matter what happened and come out just fine. I was also at South by Southwest at the exact same time, and I was speaking, and I had a lot of meetings, and I had all this stuff going on, right? So I would have liked to make a couple phone calls and call it a day, and not spend all this time crafting emails and messaging and hearing people's concerns and stuff. But that's part of the founder, that two-way open communication is critical.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned kind of what kind of your thoughts on what makes a successful company, a successful business. And being that you do angel investing and you've been through successful companies, through IPOs, you're working on one now. If you think about a company as a machine, a small machine, if you look inside of that machine, what components does it have for it to be one that runs successfully? Is it tight operations? Is it having the right team and talent? Is it having the best products for the best product market fit? What in particular have you seen successful companies have as almost like as components to them to be successful? Anything that other founders can implement in their businesses that they might not have right now?
Yeah. So I think it ultimately, the founding team is critical, but it's not all about the founding team, because of the founding team attract talent, you can only go so far, right?
Yeah.
So I think with the founding team, I typically look at one, genuine passion for the problem you're solving.
Yeah.
There are a lot of companies out there that are founded based on fads. They're founded based on what's flavor of the moment. Like right now, I don't recall every other company wanting to talk about AI in their investor decks 2 years ago, but now all anyone is talking about is AI, right? And it's kind of one of those things like, well, for the folks that have, like a good friend of mine from college he's a venture capitalist, works for an AI specific focus fund, and he's been doing this entire career. Yeah. He is genuinely passionate about AI and investing in companies that will solve problems in the space. Yeah. I would take his guidance on what AI companies to invest in, but over just companies popping up just so they can try to run off the momentum. So I think that genuine passion for the problem that you're solving is probably the first thing I look for, actually. Yeah. And then the next one is the most important qualities I look for in a founder are not product, not strategy, not team building. It's grit.
Yeah.
Grit is I think it's undervalued in the venture capital community. But if a founder does not have grit, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Because being a founder can be lonely. It can involve a lot of highs and lows, ups and downs, interpersonal dynamics, continued conviction, a combination of conviction on the problem you're solving, but also willingness to change and adapt as you get new information. And if you don't have that grit to persevere, you could be the most brilliant product mind in the world. You could be the best team builder. You could be a strategic guru. But if you're going to wilt under pressure, none of it really matters.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that individual grit, right, I think is critical. I kind of like to use a food analogy. If you can't take the heat, then get out of the kitchen. Right.
Right.
I look for that. in founders that I want to invest in as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I always like to ask this next question because I love how founders extract knowledge out of anything that they ingest. So if you can think about whether it was early in your career or now, what books or people have influenced you the most?
So I think in a great book that I read over the last few months is $1 Trillion Coach. It is a book about the executive coach for Larry and Sergey, Google.
Yeah.
We kind of talking about their early days and how they navigated through all their situations. I thought that was absolutely awesome. In terms of people who have impacted me, there's been so many. I think that a first one that comes to mind is a gentleman named John Blum. He was one of the first people that took a bet on me early in my career. He was a trustee at Stanford, but also a managing director at Citigroup in New York. And that was my first job out of college. And to have someone who is that senior at a large investment bank like that, and I'm just an 18 or probably not 18, probably 22-year-old kid coming out of college. And to have that guidance and mentorship was absolutely critical. And he's since become a friend as well. And then I think another girl figure in my career was one of my former bosses at Snapchat, a gentleman named Jeff Lucas. And Jeff was the global head of sales at Snapchat. Before that, he was the global head of sales at Viacom. But when you spend time with them and you're with them, you never get the sense that he's selling anything, right? He's building trusted relationships at the highest levels at all these incredible companies he's working with, but then also he'll be approachable to the most junior person at his own company, and has that leadership style where you can be fair and firm, but you're also just have a big heart and really care about your people. And I think that being able to see that, witness that, he's also in late 50s and on a plane constantly. So I'm almost well, he's got the energy for it. What am I talking about that I'm tired? So I think those two individuals played an integral role in my life and journey to date. I think on the Zitti side specifically, I've really sought a handful of industry experts, folks that have operated large restaurant groups and stuff in the past, and really leaned on those folks for their areas of expertise as well. I would also include my father in this one. My father's operated restaurants for over 40 years, right? And knows everything you could possibly know about independent restaurants. And he's probably uniquely qualified, forced me to listen to him, because there are many times, I may get a lot of great advice. I'm not listening to it. Because that's the other thing about being a founder is you could be headstrong, right? And I think that's something that I can tend to be. So I think that having that person in my corner is a combination of an industry expert, but also who has this unique way to cut the noise and force me to listen is also important. So I think I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by great people.
Amazing.
For sure.
It's amazing to hear your relationship with your mentors and your father and even people who you work with. And it's awesome to see, like I said, what you extract from that knowledge base. And founders, it's almost funny because we have to be headstrong in a lot of ways, but there are those people that really do cut through the noise to help on the journey, to guide in different directions. And it always seems that they have the right thing to say at the time or maybe they're just talking and we listen at the right time. Who knows? But it's always a fun dynamic. I know we're coming close to the end of the show here. And before you give us your plugs on where we can find you, where we can support, is there any question I didn't ask you that I should have, or that you would have liked to answer?
That's a really good one. No, I think it was pretty comprehensive. I think that, I would just, anything that I would answer would be directed to, if any of your listeners are considering starting a company, right? Have always been curious about it. Don't know if this is the right time, right? I would say if you've thought about starting a company for a certain period of time, if it's not just a fleeting thought, if you've thought about it for months or something like that, I will say you will never regret doing it. You may regret not doing it, but you'll never regret doing it. And some folks, I don't really view failure as an outcome, because failing and starting your own company is not failure. The amount you will learn, the relationships you'll build, what you'll be able to take those lessons into your next part of your journey, whether it's starting another company or working for another company or whatever it is invaluable. It also, I think that founding your own company takes so much like I said, grit and energy and dedication. There's a reason why there's certain age demographics that start companies and certain ones that don't, right? Because it's like the older you get, the harder it is to just, you have families, you have kids, you have all these other things that make it difficult to do. And so I think if you're at that stage of your life in that window where you have the time, the mental energy, the physical energy to put into it, you may regret not doing it. You'll never regret doing it. If you care enough about the problem you're solving, you will figure it out. Surround yourself with great people. And if you ever want to chat, shoot me a note, add me on LinkedIn, DM me on Twitter, whatever it is. And I love chatting with other founders and aspiring founders.
Yeah. And let us know where we can find you. Where can we not only find Zitti if we're a potential customer, but also you? What are your LinkedIn? Give us all your plugs, your LinkedIn, your Twitters, your websites. Tell us where we can support the product and also you as a founder.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can support the product by going to our site, zitti.com. If you're a restaurant group out there, you can request and book a demo on our website. So just fill out some basic information about your restaurant, do it, and someone on our team will reach out to you shortly and walk the product and how it could potentially help your business thrive. In terms of our social handles are Zitti Inc. So ZITTIINC across everything. So Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. And then myself, just search Dante DiCicco, my first and last name, on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And especially if you're interested in learning more about how we conduct a restaurant, if you're want to learn more about entrepreneurship or anything, I would love to chat.
Amazing, Dante. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. Not only learning about your early experience at Snapchat and investment, but also how you think about building companies and solving problems. And honestly, how you knew that you wanted to build a company. You started building a restaurant, and then in that culmination, this product happened, this vision, and now you're a year on the road. And it's exciting to see not only the traction you've gained so far, but how you can really empower other restaurant owners to take back the independence or I guess the ability to really pay attention to the operating costs and be successful as an entrepreneur. So I hope you enjoyed yourself on the show today. I know I did. And thank you so much for being on Behind Company Lines.
Thanks, Julian. Really appreciate it.
Of course.